Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormley, joined today by Derek Brown of Fantasy Pros and fantasy football analyst on the NFL Network, Michael Florio. Florio, thank you so much for making the time for us in what is the busiest time of year for everybody in this industry.
Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for having me in what is the busiest time of the year in this industry. And you two, I'm very excited to be doing the show with, but can we have a word? Where's Joe Pisapia? I thought Joe was going to be joining us.
Joey P needs breaks. He hosts way too many shows as it is. So here I am filling in as best I can for Joey Pizza. I will do my best to fill his shoes as I always do. D-Bro, how are you doing here? Busy as ever?
I'm doing good, man. I think Joe's still recuperating from the weekend that we had at Flex Draft. Probably still licking his wounds from that. So that could account for the MIA here. But, you know, Worm, always good to do a show with you. I'm always interested to see what kind of curveball you're going to throw me. They ought to be interesting.
Well, the curveball usually just ends up being, let's talk more about the Ravens or former Terps players. Sure. Today, we are talking about 12 must-have players that you guys are targeting on draft day. If you hear us reference rankings or sort of draft costs, we're typically going to be talking about our half PPR expert consensus rankings. You can find that on the Fantasy Pros website. But guys, we're going to go 6-1 from each of you for a total of 12. And Florio, we will start with you. Who is your number 6 must-have player on draft day this season?
I should know this. I know the 6. I don't know what order. So who is number 6 for me?
You have Calvin Ridley here at number 6.
I swear, we're a professional show. I swear.
Calvin Ridley. I love Calvin Ridley this year. And I don't mind paying around 3 price to get him. I did it the other day. I like it a lot more in round 4. But my thing is, Doug Peterson has always loaded his number 1 target with volume. They average around 123 targets per year, but strong case to be made, I think, that Calvin Ridley is the most talented pass catcher that Peterson has ever had the privilege of coaching. Calvin Ridley, I look at what Christian Kirk did last year. Wide receiver 12 in overall points, top 20 in points per game, and he did it largely because he was able to win downfield. Calvin Ridley is a better field stretcher. He's a better red zone target. That is where you can get your points in chunks as a receiver. I think the world has forgotten just a little bit of how good Calvin Ridley is in this pass-first offense with Trevor Lawrence, who I think will take the next step as well this year and be an MVP candidate himself. I think all of that happens because of the presence of Calvin Ridley, and that is someone that I want on my fantasy teams.
One of the things we've talked a lot about this offseason on this show is that elite players don't just forget how to be elite. So, Florio, obviously rust is the biggest question surrounding Ridley, more so than anything else. So what would you say your concern level is on the rust, or are you in that camp of he's an elite player, he's still going to be an elite player?
To quote Johnny Manziel, 0. I'm not worried at all when it comes to the rust. I admit the first couple of weeks, maybe he doesn't look like the Calvin Ridley of old, but my mindset when it comes to drafts and fantasy football as a whole is I don't want my team to be playing its best football the first 3 weeks of the season. I just have to get in the playoffs. And in some leagues, that means I need to be a game over 500. So as much as we all love the regular season and everything, if the first month looks kind of gross for Calvin Ridley, but the last month looks amazing, if I make the playoffs, he's going to lead me to championships. So I am not really that worried about the rust. I also think it's a little bit different since he gets this whole season to work with the team. If it was something like a Deshaun Watson type situation last year, I think it would be a lot different, but he is with the team all summer, is going to be there week 1 and on. So I'm really not too worried at all about rust.
Before we get to the rest of our players, I want to take just a second to tell everyone about our 2023 Fantasy Football Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/kit. It's packed with content on must-have draft targets, players to avoid, sleepers, rankings, position primers, and more from Derek Brown, Pat Fitzmaurice, Andrew Erickson, and others. Premium subscribers will get extra access to extra exclusive content along with our draft tools and our Discord, where you can interact directly with our analysts through AMAs and stages. Again, that's our 2023 Fantasy Football Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/kit. D-Bro, hit me with your number 6.
All right, well, this is going to be familiar for people that tuned into the show last year, but I'm back on the same sauce. It's Skyy Moore, baby. And this all comes down to like, look, you can gripe and complain, and I will too, that Skyy Moore did not get a lot of playing time last year. But if anybody's out there telling you that Skyy Moore is not a talented player, fade that noise immediately. Last year, I get small sample size, but one season is a small sample size, people. But what we saw out of Skyy Moore, especially projecting him this year, because camp news right now is he's going to be the starting slot wide receiver, stay on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, is fantastic. Skyy Moore last year amongst 96 wide receivers with at least 70 slot routes. 28th in target per route run rate, 25th in yards per route run. If you looked at even the overall scope of 119 wide receivers with at least 150 routes, he was 7th in yak per reception, 10th in missed tackles forced per reception. So this is all to say that the talent is there with Skyy Moore, and it is real. So while small school player didn't hit the ground running in a complicated offense in one of the best offenses in the NFL, I'm not shying away because, again, and I'm going to continue this for the rest of this episode because I got some other names here. Second-year wide receivers are strong bets to make in fantasy, and Skyy Moore is definitely one that I'm going to make.
What's the ceiling here in your eyes? Like, best case scenario, end of the season, Moore is finishing as wide receiver what?
Top 15 guy.
Top 15.
Ceiling is top 12, top 15.
Do you agree with that ceiling, Florio?
Don't get upset with me, D-bro. I am more in on. It's no secret at all. Like I'm in on Kadarius Toney.
You're a Kadarius Toney guy
of these receivers, and I think that his upside is top 12, top 15. So that's where But I will admit, one of these two guys has to hit, right? Like I also have sprinkled in some Rashee Rice in best ball drafts just because I think he'll have some spike weeks here and there, but it's not going to be Richie James leading this receiving room. And if it is, something has gone terribly wrong for the other three is what I keep saying. So while I'm in on Toney, I do think Skyy Moore is also a bet worth taking.
Florio, Kadarius Toney is not your number 5. Do you know who your number 5 is?
I do. I now know all of them thanks to D-Bro over here sending me. I knew the 6. I just didn't remember what order we had put them in. Number 5 for me is Amari Cooper. And the reason I like Cooper so much is because you have to pay a wide receiver 2 price to get him. And he's been a rock solid wide receiver 2 for a while now. I know he had that one down year in Dallas, but last year was wide receiver 10 overall, 17 in points per game. He's gone over 1,000 yards in all but one season in the last 6. It's like 6 of his last 7 seasons. He has at least 7 touchdowns in them. Last year, he was 3rd in red zone targets at the position. So all of that to me points to him having a very safe floor. Like I think he is a lock to finish somewhere around in the top 15, and that's the price you have to pay to get him. But I also think Amari Cooper comes with more upside than ever before because look at what Deshaun Watson's wide receiver 1s have always done historically. Like even Will Fuller, who I loved that year, was a wide receiver 1 when he was the top target for Deshaun Watson. So you add in the potential huge quarterback upgrade if Watson can look like his old self. The scoring opportunities go up. Everything increases. So I still think Watson brings a safe floor. If he was able to do it with Brissett, I don't see why he wouldn't be able to do it with Watson. But then if Watson can look like his old self, I think that arguably could be the best quarterback Cooper has ever played with. So you're not really having to pay for that ceiling. And I know Cooper's been kind of boring recently, but I think he could be the most exciting season of his career this year. So I really like taking him in the 4th round. I would like it even more if he falls to the 5th, which only happens occasionally, but typically the 4th round is the sweet spot.
D-Bro, in looking at the ranking for Amari Cooper from the FantasyPros analysts, Erickson has him 15. Fitz has him 15. Joey P has him 15. You have him 22nd. So why are you so much lower on Cooper?
I think I'm just lower on Deshaun Watson. And I know we've talked about this all offseason. Elite players don't forget how to be elite. I think that we also do have to bake in what we saw to Deshaun Watson last year as another data point. And for me, it's more of just like I'm hedging my bets with Amari Cooper. I think the volume is definitively going to be there, but the ceiling is in question for me because I think it's more of a wider range of outcomes of what we get out of Deshaun Watson this year and even the passing rate for this team because as much as we want to talk about how good Amari Cooper has been, could be, will be, and we're still talking about, okay, well, David Njoku is going to be a thing. Is he? Elijah Moore is going to have a bounce back. Only certain amounts of all these things that we want to happen are going to happen. So for me, it's more just hedging my bets against Watson and the passing rate for the Cleveland Browns.
Before we get to our next player, I want to take a quick second to talk to everyone about Fantrax. Guys, if you want customization in your fantasy platform, look no further than Fantrax, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Their free NFL Fantasy Football League Manager is the most customizable, easy-to-use, feature-rich platform in the industry that can easily import any current leagues you have on other platforms and begin customizing your settings immediately. Personally, I use Fantrax for my college football fantasy league, my dynasty baseball fantasy league, and of course, my longtime dynasty NFL league made the switch as well. Whether it's Devy leagues, IDP, decimal scoring, tight end premium, unique matchup settings like weekly doubleheaders, there's a reason why fantasy players who try Fantrax make it the permanent home for all their fantasy leagues because they have it all. So switch your leagues today by heading to fantrax.com/fantasypros. That's FANTRAX.com/fantasypros. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Debro, let's go to your number 5.
Well, recency's bias crew is not going to like this one. If they hated Skyy Moore, they're not going to like me talking about Cam Akers, but I'm still here, baby. And I think that what we saw out of the stretch run for Cam Akers weeks 13 through 18 as the Rams' bell cow is coming back in a big way this year inside of what was a broken offense last year. He, in that sample size of weeks 13 through 18, RB5 in fantasy points per game. So while people could be snubbing their nose that I have him ranked as an RB1 on the site, and yes, go check the ranks, RB11, I understand it sounds spicy to people, but we've already seen this type of production out of Cam Akers, and I think we're going to see it again this year. No, I'm not worried about Zach Evans or Kyron Williams, and yes, I've seen the little blurbs about Kyron Williams getting some of the passing down work, but my whole thing that comes down to Cam Akers is he is going to get snaps. In 5 of those final 6 games, 72% or higher snap rate, and he was productive. We need to sit here and throw out the full season numbers for Cam Akers out the window because, yes, we want to talk about he was coming back from an Achilles tear. Then the further out from that, we saw him regain that explosiveness. So in that 6-game sample, 62 running backs with 20 or more rushing attempts. He was 3rd lowest in stuff rate. He had the 6th highest missed tackle force per attempt rate and the 6th highest success rate on man and gap runs per fantasy points data. Yeah, baby, I'm all back in on Cam Akers. He's going to get the volume, and we're going to see him finally put it all together in a full season as a fantasy RB1.
Where do you expect this Rams offense to finish in the NFL this season? Because I know that he did most of his production last year when the offense was already injured and bad. So I'm not saying that the offense has to be great for him to be great, but just out of curiosity, what do you think the ceiling is on the Rams offense as a whole?
Assuming Stafford and Kupp are healthy for the entire season, I think that we're going to get a Rams offense because their defense is atrocious. It's terrible. They're going to be throwing a lot. They're going to have to put up points, and we're going to see that as long as they're healthy. And I get that's a big if for a lot of people. But if they're healthy, like we're talking about a top 12, top 15 offense as far as scoring. And I don't think even top 15, that's not asking a whole lot out of this offense for Cam Akers to have touchdown and scoring opportunities.
Florio, hit me with your number 4.
I know D-Bro's going to like this one.
Oh.
Darren Waller, the baller, who much like D-Bro, I have been on ever since I love Darren Waller going back to the Raiders days, but especially since the Giants have acquired him, I've been all over him. Last year, I understand he missed time due to injury, but on a per route basis, he was up there with the best in the league. Like his yards per route ran is on pace with TJ Hawkinson. It's right there with Kyle Pitts. It's a little bit behind Travis Kelce, but who isn't at the position? So he still has the capability, but last year he was being asked to play a role that he is not suited for, in my opinion. He was getting less volume because the target vacuum that is Devontae Adams was there. So to make up for it, they were using him more downfield in the intermediate to deep part of the field. Now he's back with the Giants. He's going to bring that air yard per target back down into the single digits. I think around 9 to 10 is where he's always thrived. Last year was over 13. That doesn't sound like a huge jump, but that is a big difference when we're talking about he saw something like 40 targets because he got hurt and missed so much time. If you guaranteed me today that Darren Waller plays all 17 games, the only tight end that I think gets more volume than him, that has a chance of getting more volume than him, is Travis Kelce. Outside of that, I think Darren Waller is a lock to lead the position in volume, and I trust Brian Daboll so much to put his star playmaker in a position to succeed. Every day out of Giants camp, we are hearing that no one can guard Darren Waller. I think that is going to be the case again this year. He is my tight end 3 right now, but he goes off the board at tight end 7. So I have him. He is my most drafted tight end. My approach this year, I take Travis Kelce in round 1 sometimes because I don't want to have no Travis Kelce shares. And if I don't get him, I just wait until like the 7th round and grab Darren Waller.
Debro hears you say that you have Waller at tight end 3 and says that's too low. He's got him at tight end 2 in half PPR leagues. Debro, I'm going to limit you to under 20 seconds. Just praise Waller for a second.
Waller the baller returns in 2023, baby! I'm so ready for it, man. This offense is being designed exactly like they've designed it for Travis Kelce. It's Kelce and all the rest of everybody, except for Skyy Moore. In the Giants camp, it's going to be Waller and all of the rest of these beta wide receivers. I'm here for it.
Guys, anyone who knows me knows how much I love going to see sports in person. I've talked about how excited I am to see my first place Baltimore Orioles live in San Diego next week, checking off my 15th MLB stadium, which means I'm halfway to seeing all 30, and I plan to get all the way to 30 with the help of Game Time, the fastest growing ticketing app in the U.S. for last-minute amazing deals on tickets to see your favorite baseball team, band, or comedian. Download Game Time. And again, it's not just sports. August means huge summer concerts and comedy shows all across the country, and Game Time has your tickets. Download the Game Time app and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the Game Time app and enter code FANTASYPROS for $20 off no matter where you live. Get out and have some fun this week. Download Game Time today and enter code FANTASYPROS. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Debro, give me your next must-have player.
Oh, the next guy I talked about, and I've talked about him on previous shows. Erickson and I got in a very spirited debate about him previously. Dameon Pierce, man. I love Dameon Pierce. And I think that if we weren't so wide receiver centric this year and how much we love wide receivers, we would rewind a few seasons, Dameon Pierce would be a guy everybody would be talking about. He'd be going, again, like the hype was heavy last year. What did Dameon Pierce do to disappoint on that hype? He was the RB 20 in fantasy points per game, RB 16 in expected fantasy points per game. Not only that, he checked multiple boxes as far as efficiency. 13th in missed tackles forced per attempt. He had the third, and this is the other big point, and I talked about this on previous shows. Go back to listen to the RB tiers episode with Joey P, me, and Erickson. But this offensive line is going to get better because honestly, they have nowhere to go but up, guys. Dameon Pierce ran behind an offensive line last year that had the third lowest yards before contact per attempt. So basically, this guy, if he wasn't so good at breaking tackles, he would have had a terrible year. But because of that, he had a really solid season last year, and guess what? He's going to have an even better sophomore season. Not only that, we haven't even seen what he can do in the passing game. That's going to be unlocked this year. CJ Stroud is going to operate a better offense than Davis Mills ever could. And for everybody at home, Dameon Pierce was extremely good in the passing game in college. Outside of bad coaching and stuff, we're talking about a player that not only excelled in pass blocking snaps, he's going to own that passing down role over Devin Singletary, considering he only allowed 0 sacks and 1 quarterback hit in all of college, as well as he was 15th in yards per route run in his final season at Florida. I'm ready for Dameon Pierce to be a 3-down workhorse in this Houston Texans offense, which honestly, as we get more reports out of camp, I think is going to be a better offense than people are giving it credit for.
This is another player where Debro is easily the odd man out compared to the Fantasy Pros crew. In this case, he's much higher. In fact, you're at least 10 spots higher than every other Fantasy Pros analyst on Dameon Pierce. I'm not quite there with you. You have him RB 13 currently. I'm not quite there, but I am closer to you than I am to the other guys. I think the offense is going to be way better than expected. I think Pierce is going to be better than expected. So, Florio, I'm curious from you, where do you land on Pierce?
Where do the other guys have him ranked?
23rd, 23rd, and 26th, and then Debro's got him 13th.
I'm pretty much smack in the middle. He's in my top 20, but he's not 13. I think I have him something like RB 18 or 19. I do like the talent of Dameon Pierce a whole lot. I do find myself either Cam Akers goes a lot where he goes, and I have Akers and him back to back. And I like Miles Sanders a lot in that range. But everything that Debro said, like, I agree with. I think Pierce is a really good running back. The only concern I have is that I think Devin Singletary is a bigger threat to steal some volume than anyone that he had to share the backfield with last year.
That's fair. Let's stick with you, Florio.
Bill's Homer says what?
Devin Singletary is the epitome of an league average back.
Florio, let's stick with you for your next pick.
My next pick, I was hoping number 2 was right now because it would have sequenced perfectly into it. But another one that I know we're on the same page with here, Jameson Williams. He is my guy this year. He is my most drafted player in drafts so far this year, and I do not see that changing. In early drafts, took this kid with a top 40 pick back in like March. And I was like, I think come August, this will be consensus. Obviously it didn't happen because of the suspension, but I love so much about Jameson Williams' game. He came out in that loaded draft class now 2 years ago with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and a ton of talent. He received the highest next-gen prospect score of all of them. So I think that goes a long way. He was uber efficient in college, so productive. Would have arguably been the top wide receiver taken potentially if he didn't tear his ACL that year. You talk about explosiveness. He is one of the most explosive players in the league. And I put out a thread on Twitter right now. This is a couple weeks old, but I know you look at his game log and it's 1 catch for 40 yards and a touchdown, but there was a number of plays where he won downfield and Jared Goff just didn't connect with him. You give these two the whole summer to work out and get that chemistry together. And I think the Lions are doing it right, but saying like, we're going to give Jameson Williams as many snaps as possible this summer because he needs them. But you talk about week 7 on. The first 6 weeks of the season are the easiest to navigate when it comes to getting by with the player on suspension because, one, you're not drafting Jameson Williams to be a starter. You are not drafting him, not expecting him to be out. Like, you already could plan for this. Plus, bye weeks don't come into effect for the first 4 weeks of the season. Injuries aren't as piled up as they are early on. But I think if this kid hits double-digit rounds you get him in, if he hits in the second half of the season, he brings league-winning upside on an offense that I think will take the next step forward. I think him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, we're going to be talking about them as one of the top wide receiver duos a year from now. So I'm all about getting the upside, that the league winner that Jameson Williams is in the double-digit rounds.
So 6 week suspension. Let's give them a month to shake off the rust when he gets back. We sit here after their week 9 bye, week 10. Where do you think he will be ranked in your weekly rankings at that point? What kind of receiver will people have for the second half of the season?
Easily a wide receiver 3, but I'm going to say he'll be a top 24 wide receiver with wide receiver 1 upside easily.
Guys, it's time to look ahead to the future with our Here's to What's Next segment presented by Miller Lite. We're using this segment to look ahead and celebrate the future stars of fantasy football by talking about our favorite sleepers. And today, I want to ask about a player who was everybody's favorite sleeper just last year, and that's Gabe Davis. Debro, I will start with you. Is Davis the most classic post-type sleeper of all time?
Yeah, I mean, he perfectly fits the bill here, Worm. With Gabe Davis, the thing that does not get brought up enough about Gabe Davis is how much his season last year was hampered by injury. Now, when we saw him healthy last year, we saw flashes of brilliance, which we saw in the playoffs the previous season. So a fully healthy Gabe Davis, can he still take that next step? Because he's going to be the deep threat in Josh Allen's repertoire. Yeah, absolutely. I'm in on Gabe Davis as a post-hype guy.
So, Florio, as a Bills fan, we'll clear out the paint for you and let you just go to work on Gabe Davis.
I am in on Gabe Davis as a value this year. I think that a big reason why he's going where he's going is because he's paying for the sins of the fantasy community. We overhyped him last year. That's on us, not on him. But I agree with D-Bro, the injuries, like, not only did Gabe Davis suffer an ankle injury early in the season, which he said lingered and hampered him throughout the year. Let's look at Josh Allen's elbow injury. Before the elbow injury, he had a 109.5 rating on deep passes, 20-plus air yards, and averaged 18.9 yards per attempt. After the elbow injury, the rating dropped to 66.8, and he averaged 8.7 yards per attempt on those passes. I love Josh Allen. He was not the same quarterback after he hurt his elbow. His fantasy stats went down. Davis really struggled from that point on. So I think with both being healthy this year and the 3-4 round discount you get on him compared to last year, I think it is a great post-hype sleeper to take a shot on and a strong wide receiver value.
With a Miller Lite in your hand, summer doesn't just taste great, it tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. Or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. D-Bro, let's go to your number 3.
My number 3 is a guy has got to be Diontae Johnson. I keep talking about him on this show, but the thing about it is that people are not listening because he's still drafted in that wide receiver 3 range, and I'm still going to keep gobbling up all of this value. With Diontae Johnson last year, again, it was the ultimate run bad last year. Over the last 2 seasons, and this comes back to a talent opportunity, and Diontae gets this in spades, and he will continue to get this because what he gets open all the time. If you look over the last 2 combined seasons, he is second behind only A.J. Brown in open score. Diontae Johnson is going to be the unequivocal wide receiver 1 in this offense. He was 10th in red zone targets, and I said it's run bad. Everybody knows he didn't score any freaking touchdowns. He's going to score touchdowns this year, and I'm not telling you it's going to be double digits, but anywhere between 6 and 8 touchdowns is going to be plenty enough for him to pay off at his price point for a guy that was wide receiver 20 in expected fantasy points per game, and you look back at the rear view, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 22 in the 2 previous years, touchdowns come back, Diontae's going to be a top 20 guy this year.
Florio, I will once again ask you to make a ruling between D-Bro and the entire rest of the FantasyPros staff who rank Diontae Johnson 27th, and 26th. D-Bro's got him up at 18. Which side are you closer to?
I'm closer to the others. I'm sorry. I love Diontae Johnson as a talent. I was on this crusade early in the offseason where I did not understand why George Pickens was getting drafted ahead of him. But that has changed. My only concern, I don't have any concerns with Diontae Johnson, the player. I have a ton of concerns with Kenny Pickett and how many scoring opportunities. Like, obviously he's going to get more touchdowns, but is he going to get more than like 5? I don't know, because I think Kenny Pickett is pretty terrible.
Every time we've talked about Diontae Johnson in the offseason, and I have brought up that my concerns are because of Kenny Pickett, I've been called a Ravens homer by D-Bro. He was side with you, apparently.
Are you a Pickett guy?
Am I a Pickett guy? I mean, I'm not so much of a Pickett guy as I think Pickett can be good enough to allow Diontae to sit here and have a bounce back season. Pickett's numbers down the stretch were sneaky, very, very good if you look at passing grades and yards per attempt and things like that. But I will say this, I was not a Pickett guy coming out as a prospect, but some of those numbers down the stretch did kind of sway me into saying, okay, I don't know if Pickett's going to be great, fantastic, but I think he could be good enough.
Florio, let's get to the final Buffalo Bill we are talking about today.
I have Twitter up as my secondary screen right now, so I see D-Bro was tweeting about James Cook just a little while ago. I love me some James Cook this year, and what I keep saying is James Cook is paying for Devin Singletary's sins. And I said a little while ago that Singletary is the epitome of league average. So that's why he was only able to be an RB3 with the volume that he had been seeing last year. People make it seem like Bills running backs get no volume whatsoever. Devin Singletary has been good for at least 175 carries in 2 straight seasons and over 50 targets in 3 straight. You give that sort of volume to James Cook, who led the NFL in explosive runs last year, whereas Devin Singletary was around league average. we're talking now about some of those Singletary runs that went for 5, maybe 10 yards, going for 40, 50, I don't know, even more yards than that. Like, this guy's going to have long runs in him, long touchdowns, and he is a way better receiver than Devin Singletary. So not only could he get those dump-off passes that Singletary has already been getting, but we're seeing highlights of him in camp winning downfield. And to me, when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, who I would say is the best deep ball thrower in football outside of maybe Patrick Mahomes, and now you have a running back who can utilize that skill set, the sky is the limit. I keep saying I think James Cook will be a top 20 running back this year, with even higher upside than that, and you're getting him at an RB3 price because of past Bills running backs, not because of anything James Cook has done.
So I like James Cook a lot. Obviously, you two both like James Cook a lot. But D-Bro, whenever we post about James Cook, we obviously did the Miller Lite segment a couple of weeks ago where we talked about him, and here's to what's next. We get some pushback from the audience who isn't quite there. So we all like him, but why are the masses not on board with us in our love for James Cook this year?
They're worried about red zone opportunities. They're worried about Dameon Harris, who, by the way, is already dealing with a knee injury in camp and missing time right now. Like, that's what it all comes down to. Josh Allen doesn't check down. He's the goal line back. And I'm like, okay, all of these things, you've seen what Devin Singletary has done in this offense, and James Cook is a better running back. And I brought this up on multiple shows, but Florio probably hasn't heard this one. Florio, I'm curious your take on this one. I look at James Cook as the discount version of Jahmyr Gibbs. Thoughts?
Jahmyr Gibbs, another one of my guys this year. I can see the comparison. Again, discount is the right word because I don't want to put discount too lofty. But yeah, I can see these similarities right away. And you are the first person I've heard say that. So yeah, this is the first time.
That comparison has also drawn the ire of some of our Twitter followers. So D-Bro is happy to hear you agree with that. D-Bro, give me your number 2 must-have player this year.
Again, going back to the sophomore receiver, well, it's got to be Chris Olave. And again, this is talent. This is betting on talent and opportunity and the ascension of a guy that showed us in his first season in the NFL that he has alpha type upside. You're looking at Chris Olave. He was 9th in open score amongst wide receivers over the last 2 years. Top 15 in target share, target per route run rate. The things that what I think also adds to his ceiling, because people are going to look at that wide receiver 25 finish last year and say, can he get as high as we have him ranked in the industry? Can he get as high as we think he possibly can? And I'll push back on it in saying, we're not asking a whole lot out of this offense or Derek Carr to just be better than tossing Chris Olave better targets when Chris Olave finished 53rd in catchable target rate last year. And if he gets more work in the red zone this year, because he was 40th in red zone targets, then touchdowns, opportunity, everything aligns for Chris Olave to have a monster second season.
Yeah, Olave is really interesting because I adore him this year, but I also think he's fairly ranked. If you look at expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros, he's 12th. Which I don't think any of the 11 guys ahead of him, I can really justify taking him over. And yet I love him at the price, and I think he is going to smash. And if healthy, like, I will be shocked if he's not a wide receiver 1 this year. So where I draft him is a little different than how much I love him. Florio, what do you make of Olave this year?
I agree with everything that both of you had said. Like, I have him ranked at 13th at wide receiver just because the 11, like you said, and then I have Calvin Ridley ahead of him. But to selflessly plug a little bit, I did 25 top breakout candidates this year. You could get the video over at NFL Plus. And number 1 for me is Chris Olave. For a lot of the reasons that you said, I kind of called him, I gave him the nickname Mr. Air Yards. And Derek Carr was just a better deep ball thrower than any of these Saints quarterbacks last season. So that paired with everything else that D-Bro said, I think a big breakout season is coming.
Florio, it's time for your number 1. And just to let everybody know, this also would have been D-Bro's number 1 if Florio didn't claim him first.
We like a lot of the same players, if you can't tell. But for me, number 1 is Tony Pollard. And last season, Tony Pollard finishes the RB8 in overall and points per game. And people Now there's over the 220 carries vacated by Zeke Elliott's leaving, and it's like 23 targets because Zeke was not catching any passes last year, but he was getting a lot of the goal line work as well, which is so valuable for fantasy football. And I think that's going to be even more volume added onto Tony Pollard's plate. And the concern I've seen is like, what if he can't hold up? I'm like, based off of what? Because last season he had a career high in volume and he got more explosive and more efficient as a runner than he had been in previous years. So I think that Tony Pollard in this Cowboys offense as their lead running back with very little competition behind him right now, I'm just praying that they don't sign Zeke Elliott. But as of right now, I think he has a clear path to being the RB1. I think he should be drafted as a top 5 or 6 running back, depending on how you feel about some of the other top guys with question marks around them. And I really thought coming into this year, you were going to need to pay a first-round price to get Tony Pollard. Now you can get him in the mid to late second round. It feels like stealing every time I get to take him there, but I love it. You pair him with an elite wide receiver in round 1, and you could have a top 5 player at the 2 most important positions in fantasy football.
Do you know, Florio, where Debro has Tony Pollard ranked amongst running backs?
I think I saw him tweet this out. Is it number 1?
It is number 1.
So would you take him first overall?
I would not take him first overall because you don't have to take him first overall.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, will I take him in the first round in some drafts if I want him? Absolutely.
Well,
I've done it already.
I think that's an interesting question because if you're picking high in the first round, he might not fall to the late second. So if he is your RB1, let's say Jefferson and Chase are off the board, you're picking third. It is kind of a risk to see if he will get back to you in the late second. So would you take him third, potentially, Debro?
I would, yes. Okay. If I'm going to sit here and push my chips in and I'm going to back up my ranking of him as the RB1 overall, because again, I've been throwing out monikers on this show, so why not another one? Here you go, Florio. I look at it and tell me if I'm wrong here. The entire offseason, did we not hear all of these bad narratives when Austin Eckler became the lead back for the Los Angeles? I look at Tony Pollard as Austin Eckler 2.0, and I'm not missing this train. I'm not.
All right. Yeah, I used to have to joke around and say I was Jon Snow fighting in that famous battle where he's fighting the entire army, because that offseason, very few of us were in on Austin Eckler, and so many people were out. I do like that call a lot.
The Game of super fan of me just has to point out, Battle of the Bastards was the battle that
I didn't know if I could say the.
Yes, I thought that might be. I thought that might be it. In fact, I actually don't even know if we can say it, so hopefully we can. Debro, give me your number 1 must-have player that is not Tony Pollard.
Well, since I'm going to war here, I've got to go with my guy, and I've been hyping him since Senior Bowl, and I'm not going to stop now, man. Christian Watson, my number 1 guy. I'm going to sit here and push the chips in again, and we're talking about making bets on talented players. Christian Watson is that dude. He showed it last year, and he's going to stay that dude. There's nobody on that wide receiver depth chart that's going to contest him for targets this year. And regardless of whatever you think about Jordan Love, again, I've talked about varying levels of quarterback play on this show so far, the Derek Carrs of the world, the Kenny Pickett's. I'm betting on talent, people, and Christian Watson has that in spades. 14th in open score, right behind everybody's new favorite breakout wide receiver, Garrett Wilson. Christian Watson doesn't get that same type of respect. Last year, weeks 10 through 18, he was wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game, 2nd in yards per route run, 10th in yak per reception. Whether it's Jordan Love giving him short area targets and Christian Watson turns on the afterburners and takes it to the house, or he's catching deep bombs, which we've seen plenty of those in training camp in the highlights, Christian Watson is that dude, remains that dude, and will be that dude in 2023.
Quickly before we wrap, Florio, what is your stance on Jordan Love this season, just while we're talking about the Packers offense, because he's such a divisive player?
I'm not sold on Jordan Love. I understand that he's looked good in camp and stuff. I also understand Aaron Rodgers was a legend and they didn't want to get rid of him and stuff, but I feel like if Jordan Love was ready a year ago, maybe they would have made the move a year ago. I do think there's upside here with Jordan Love. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist, but I'm just not as sold. And because of that, I think I'm a little bit lower on Christian Watson than you are, Debro. But I agree with everything you said about him as an individual player. I am just not as sold on his offense and his quarterback.
Let's run through the 12 names we mentioned here to recap. Debro from 6 to 1 had Skyy Moore, Cam Akers, Dameon Pierce, Diontae Johnson, Chris Olave, and Christian Watson. Florio from 6 to 1 had Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Darren Waller, Jameson Williams, James Cook, and Tony Pollard. We will wrap up there. Please, everybody, don't forget to check out the opportunities I mentioned with Game Time and Fan Tracks. Go buy a Miller Lite for your draft. Check out the draft kit on Fantasy Pros. This is the really fun time of year to be a huge fantasy football player and fan, and I love draft season. It's so much fun. Thank you guys for joining me. For Debro and Florio, I'm Ryan Wormley. We'll see you guys again next time.